Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thanks so very much for watching and downloading in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. And come to think of it, one of the most consumed foods on the planet is cheese. We are a dairy obsessed nation. I can't tell you how many times people have told me, it's like, Chuck, I could go vegan except I love cheese. I just can't give up my dairy. Well, my friends, we have the answer today. We have with us a friend of the show. She is a social media star, and she's got a new book on the way called Breaking Up with Dairy. And with that, we welcome Bailey Ruskus back to the show. Chef Bay, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing so good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Congratulations on the book. This is fantastic.
Thanks. I'm so excited. This has been on my heart for such a long time, and it's so surreal to think that it's literally almost here.
I know. So, you just heard me say so many people say they could go vegan except for the dairy. Was that the inspiration for your book?
Yeah, I mean, that is a big one. My cheese chapter in here is called The One You Can't Live Without because it really it really so much is that. Everyone's like, "Oh, I could do everything except my cheese." It really is the one that we can't live without. I mean, we are actually addicted to it, so that's part of it. But yeah, that was a big reasoning behind it. It was also my own personal journey where I personally was addicted to cheese as a classically French trained chef. Dairy and cheese and Gruyere and, whole milk lattes kind of was my thing for such a long time. And it was something that was really contributing to my own illness. And breaking up with it was one of the hardest things ever. It was also a little bit inspired by my toxic ex-boyfriends because I wrote the book in like a full breakup blueprint style where dairy really is that toxic ex that you just can't get away from because it's everywhere.
Oh man, that's a nice inside nugget right there. That's pretty interesting, right? So,
Yeah.
was dairy the hardest breakup you've ever been through?
Yes. I mean, not just with eating and consuming cheese itself, but also with the whole, the dairy industry, being a chef, like having that be a part of my identity, a part of, fitting into the boys club of chef culture. Breaking up with dairy for me was so much more than just what I'm eating. It was so much a part of my identity, so much part of who I was as a chef. As a woman, I was having such a hard time having men take me seriously in general. So the second I was like, oh, now I'm going to be like totally plant-based and not cook with any dairy products. I just felt like I was going to be kind of isolated from the industry. So yeah, it was a very hard pill for me to swallow and a very hard step for me to take to really fully be dairy free. But once I made it happen, honestly, my life completely changed.
Yeah, and who doesn't want to get rid of that baggage that we've been carrying along and it's just
So much
dragging us down?
baggage.
It's not always easy to cut that string, but you figured out a way to do it.
Mhm.
What was the hardest thing for you in terms of learning to cook without dairy?
I think it was just making that choice. I think that's the hardest thing for most people is not necessarily, making those steps to learn and cook. I think it's making that actual choice and every single day making that awareness, having that awareness, making that choice and going to the grocery store and being like, okay, today I'm going to make a cashew milk instead of just grabbing that regular milk that I go for. Or today I'm going to try a new plant-based cheese on the shelf. Or today, I'm going to go for something different. And I think, or like when you're making mashed potatoes, not going for the sour cream, going for a cashew cream or a tofu cream instead. So I think it's that choice that we all make that is so, so hard for people because we're so comfortable in the choices that we're making. And to get outside of that choice, to get uncomfortable really is so hard for people because let's be real, people are exhausted. There's so much going on in the world and it causes stress for people to like make that choice. So I think that's definitely the hardest part. And I definitely talk about that a lot in the book before I get into the recipes, because that is such a big, like the psychological aspect of why we all eat dairy, why we all eat cheese, why it's so hard to get away from in social situations, at restaurants, when we're traveling. That psychological piece is like almost harder, I think, than making the recipes. Once you can get that down, then if you have a recipe like this one with this many recipes and different styles of milks and cheeses and sauces and, desserts, then you can really start to integrate those choices that you make mentally. But I definitely think the mental aspect is the hardest part.
Yeah, all right. Hold that book cover back up again. You said a recipe like this one. What are we looking at the on the cover of the book?
This is a one pot cacio e pepe. So it's an Italian pasta dish. And this is one pot. So you don't even have to strain the pasta. You cook everything together. There's something called a portable mozzarella that goes in here. You can make your own no strain almond milk to go in here, or any sort of milk. It doesn't have to be almond milk. It can be an oat milk, a hemp milk. There's so many different types of milk you can make. And then there's a Parmesan cheese on the top that's actually made out of potatoes. And it's amazing.
Ooh. Trey, fancy. Is that a hard I mean, like, let's not sugarcoat this. Is it a hard recipe to whip up, Chef Bay?
The Parmesan recipe, I say, would be like intermediate. So when it comes to the cheeses, I wanted to make sure there was no hard fermentation. There was no weird ingredients. So we don't use carrageenan. There's no rejuvelac. The only kind of interesting ingredient that we use is called agar-agar. And that is essentially just like a seaweed style of gelatin. And that helps things just kind of set. So that's the weirdest ingredient that there is, but you'll never see a recipe in this book that's like sit on the counter for 48 hours and let it ferment for 6 months in your fridge. Because when I was researching for this book, I looked at dairy, like regular cheese making, and I also looked at all the dairy-free books. And I think the biggest red flag with those was that, and no hate to those people, obviously they're doing the good work as well. But I think one of the biggest roadblocks that people have is, you go to the grocery store, you just buy cheese, like it's already made. So people aren't going to really want to go through that big fermentation phase or risk, wasting money on ingredients if you don't ferment it right, or it doesn't have these processes. So the longest you have to wait is overnight to get any of these cheeses, which is something I really wanted to make sure.
Nice, nice. All right, now shoot me straight here. All
Yeah.
right, so there are people that if they're having a rough day, they reach for that piece of chocolate and that soothes the soul.
Uh-huh.
Other people, it's that slice of cheddar maybe on top of a cracker, and you take that bite and it's just like, oh, suddenly the world's at peace again.
Uh-huh.
Do you get that I mean, you were talking about the psychological factor, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's a serious one. So it's like people turn to food for a smile. So do you still get that same kind of satisfaction with the recipes that are in your dairy-free book?
That's a really good question. So a lot of times when people, if you're going from eating a lot of regular cheese all the time, which is just pure milk fat, to eating dairy-free cheese, it's not going to have that the way that you put it, Chuck, was so perfect, where you were like, everything's right in the world. And I think there's something to remember is that when we're babies and we get our mom's milk, we are so comforted. We have that like dopamine release. Everything is safe. We're like, okay, we were just so uncomfortable. We had so much unrest, and now we have this milk and we're so warm and fuzzy and everything's happy. And so that's kind of what the dairy industry has profited off of, is that feeling of us wanting to be safe and held and loved, and that dopamine hit. And so when you're eating pure milk fat, which is basically cheese, not only is it delicious, the fat molecules on your taste buds, and you're just like, oh, this is great, but it's also that comforting dopamine release, that feeling that you had when you were a baby, that literally like brings out your inner child and makes you feel safe. And so it does take a minute to get through that like addictive kind of biological part of eating dairy-free cheese, because you're not getting that same thing. However, cashews are a good example, where cashews are kind of like nature's natural antidepressant. They're great for our mood. They're great for our brains. And so there are ways that you can kind of like still get that, not as intensely, but the thing with dairy-free cheese is you don't need a ton of it, right? You kind of get satisfied after a little bit. Whereas regular cheese, dairy-filled cheese, you kind of want to keep going and going and going, because you want to keep getting that high. So you end up eating less of it. And I think a lot of times people experience weight loss when they go the dairy-free cheese route, because they realize that they're not having that like addictive or that need to continue to keep eating that dairy.
Well, I mean, you mentioned dopamine. I don't know about the dopamine response either, but I can say I've had your recipes in the past and I've said, man, these are dope. Like, they're really good. So, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's got to be some sort of dopamine response up there.
I mean,
because they always put a smile on my face.
Good food is good food. You know what I mean? At the end of the day. So that's what it breaks down to.
Yeah, yeah. So talk to us about the recipes in the book. So you've got 100 in there. Is there a little bit of everything for everyone?
Yes. So dairy is one of the biggest food allergies in the world. 68% of all people are lactose intolerant. With that in mind, I also am very much aware that there are so many other food allergies. And with the state of our food industry and chronic illness, 1 in 2 people have a chronic illness. And oftentimes with those chronic illnesses come food allergies or foods that people can't eat. So I really, really, really thought about that and wanted to make sure that this was a book that everyone could enjoy. So I thought about nuts, cashews. I know cashews and nuts are the same things, but sometimes people just have a cashew allergy. Also soy, we have gluten, grains, and oil. And so we wanted to make sure that all of those things were highlighted. So at the bottom of every recipe, there's a ledger that says oil-free or grain-free or nut-free or soy-free. And if it's not free of one of those things, in the beginning of the book, I talk about what you can swap it out with. And like 98% of the recipes are gluten-free. Most of the cheeses are oil-free. And there's just like, I just really wanted there to be something for everyone. Now, the way that the book is laid out, there's an entire chapter on milk because I really think that the base of all dairy products, cottage cheese, cheese, sauces, dishes is milk. Like everything starts with milk. So I wanted to make sure that every single person could find a milk that they love for their everyday, and also milk that's more fun for like their lattes or for making milkshakes or for something like that. So there's the pistachio milk. There's a Lazy Girls Barista soy milk. There's no strain almond milk. There's a hemp milk. There's so many different kinds of milk, which was so important to me. There's also a whole milk alternative because I know a lot of people who are going to buy this book also have kids. And I think it's really important to just show your kids that you can easily swap it out and it's no big deal. So, and that's also a really good one for like a heavy cream replacement in recipes. We also have a whole cheese chapter that's got everything from goat cheese to the family style cheddar block to a baked brie, like everything you can think of. There's a sauce chapter. So that's kind of like, a truffle mac and cheese sauce. There's this guajillo sauce that you can put on, enchiladas. There's hollandaise, like everything you can think of that has dairy in it is definitely in this book. I mean, almost everything. You could only fit so much, but I tried my best to get everything in there. And then the last 3 chapters integrate the milks, cheeses, and the sauces. So we have main meals that you can cook for someone. I call main meals worthy of a third date because the book is really literally written as, what do you do post breakup? And then we've got a life of the party, which is basically party entertaining, have friends over. And then we have the sweetest thing, which is our desserts, which has all the milks and all the things in it.
That's awesome. I got to go back to the milk thing because you said one that I thought was like really funny. What was it? The Lazy Girl Barista milk? Is that what you called it?
Lazy Girl Barista soy milk. That's actually where the picture of the rollers comes from. It's from that recipe.
Okay. All right. Hold on. Detour. It takes a brave woman to put herself on the back cover of a book in curlers. My hat is off to you. My hat is off to you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The story of the cover is so funny. We went back with like 1,000 different covers. And originally I wanted to be in a milkman outfit on the cover because I was like, I need to be the new age, dairy-free milk woman. But those pictures are inside the book. They didn't quite make the cover, but yeah, I really wanted this to be, of course, it's a book for everyone. It's not gender specified, but I wanted this to be a book for the girlies. Like we've all gone through breakups, and also dairy has such negative effects on our health. It increases our risk for breast cancer. It increases our period pains. It gives us like so many of my friends have tummy issues and gastrointestinal issues and bloating and acne and all these things. And so I really, in a time where I feel like since I have endometriosis, like women's health is so under-researched, understudied. Women are not taken seriously enough. And breaking up with dairy is one of the best things that you can do for your health in that regard, especially coming from a woman's perspective. And I know how hard it is for us, especially if we have kids or especially if we're traveling a lot or we're super busy or we're in a relationship where that person has no interest in being dairy-free or being plant-based. So I really kind of wrote this funny. It's so funny. It's sarcastic. Some of the things I wrote, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I put that in there because it really is just kind of a play on words about breakups and how we all go through them and what life is like after a breakup, because breaking up is hard to do.
I dig it. And you're telling a story as well as giving information. Like, I think that that's cool. And what I also like is, number one, I'm sorry that you feel like you're not taken seriously as a woman. Like, it's harder to be taken seriously. I will never know because obviously I'm not a woman, but I do take you seriously.
Thank you.
One of the reasons I do is because you're authentic and you're getting across a very serious message, but you're doing it in a fun way that is very much Chef Bay. So like That's a skill that not a lot of people have, believe it or not. You recognize that?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. I think when you can be anyone in this world, it's most important to just be yourself. And I think when it comes to taking care, being taken seriously, I think I was more in regards to being at the doctor's office and how a lot of women, especially with endometriosis, aren't taken seriously. I actually just recently, I've been kind of checking my fertility. I'm about to be 33 in a couple weeks. So it's kind of like that time for me to figure out what I'm going to do. And it is very hard to be taken seriously as a woman with endometriosis in a modern world. So yeah, I definitely feel for all the women out there who feel like they're swimming upstream because it's definitely hard.
Well, listen, if I'm you, the next time I go to the doctor's office, I make sure that I've got a copy of this book here. And if you feel like you're not being taken seriously, you're like, look, doc, and you just throw that down on the exam room table and you're like, I got a book. You will listen to every word that's coming out of my mouth.
Yeah,
And, just see what they say. Because I guarantee that doctor that you're talking to does not have a book. I'm
that's
just
true.
saying.
That is true, but I'm quick to just be like, okay, if this isn't working, if you don't, a lot of it is not education too. Like a lot of doctors aren't fully educated on endometriosis, let alone
Yeah.
diet. A lot of
Yeah.
doctors will look me in the face and say diet has nothing to do with endometriosis. And I'm like, I got to walk away. I can't convince them. I'm not here to educate them. I want to. I'm going to send them the exam room podcast and I'm going to walk away because at some point you kind of I've seen hundreds of doctors in my lifetime with endo. So it's okay to walk away. For anyone
Yeah.
listening, it's okay to find a doctor that aligns with your values, even if it takes a while to get there.
Yeah, I think we talked about that the first time
Yeah.
you were on the show when we got your
Hmm.
whole story. We'll make sure that
Yeah,
we link off to that in the show description here,
definitely.
which is really good. I don't think that we ever finished up. I got distracted by the curlers. I don't think we ever finished up about what that lazy girl barista soy milk was. Like, okay,
Yeah.
walk us through what that was.
The Lazy Girl Barista soy milk. Okay, so that started with I really wanted a soy milk in the cookbook, but again, I wanted it to be simple for every single type of person to make. And making soy milk is actually kind of time consuming. You have to boil the soybeans and you got to scrape off the foam, and there's all these things that you have to do. And so after testing soy milk recipes for a while, I was like, this just isn't going to work. This isn't going to work for me. I'm inherently lazy sometimes. I don't want to go through all this just to have soy milk. So I was like, how can I do this? And so I actually use silken tofu as the Lazy Girls Barista soy milk. And it works really well if you have an espresso machine or you steam your coffee because it gets so foamy and it's actually really high in protein. So it's kind of a win-win. You get that soy milk vibe made at home without all of the labor and the effort that goes into a soy milk.
Yeah, well played. All right, I dig that. I dig that. Now, um, so our director here has that tree nut allergy.
Mm-hmm.
Or has a tree nut allergy. I hope they don't mind me mentioning this. So you mentioned that some of the recipes in your book you do not have any nuts in them, but
Yes.
you're trying to replicate dairy. How hard is it to do without the cashews or the almonds or a lot of these nuts that we see used in the store-bought plant-based cheeses?
It's definitely challenging. I will say this book is probably the hardest book I'll ever write because we really were trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to plant-based cheeses specifically and really making them allergy friendly, but also delicious. And I mean, if you really look at it, you want that fatty, silky, velvety flavor on the tongue. So that is really hard to replicate. And I think it's so important that we have recipes that satisfy and that are like, yes, I could totally switch this for that. So in the beginning of the cookbook, I say like, if you have a cashew allergy, you can swap it with blanched almonds, or you could swap it with sunflower seeds. For instance, we have a pourable mozzarella on here that is originally cashew based, but if you have a cashew allergy, you can swap it with sunflower seeds and the result is pretty much the same. So there are a few little tweaks depending on what you do. But yeah, I think it's really important to be able to have options because a lot of times I get so many messages from people on social media and in my email and with our online challenges and our Substack where people are like, God, this looks so good, but I can't eat cashews, or my son's allergic to cashews, or I want to bring this to my kid's school, but they're very cognizant of food allergies and we can't have any nuts in anything. And I think that's so important. So there's definitely something for everyone in the cookbook for sure.
What about fans of nutritional yeast? Did Nooch make the cover or make the book? Not the cover. The cover's reserved for curls. But yeah.
So some recipes have nooch in them, but I always say this about nutritional yeast. I think it's an optional ingredient. It's never nutritional yeast is like a little extra like something something. It's never something that makes or breaks a recipe. I think that sometimes people lean too hard on nutritional yeast and it can give the cheese a very chalky flavor. And so for me, I tried every single recipe with and without nutritional yeast. With the nutritional yeast, of course, it's like a little bit cheesier, a little bit more of that thing, but it's still delicious. It'll still melt. It'll still slice. It'll still do all the things you want it to do without the nutritional yeast. So it's honestly a personal choice, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, like there are like major Nooch fans. Like I've seen Nooch t-shirts and I'm just like that person really likes their Nooch, you know.
Yes,
But you're right,
totally.
come to think of it, the way that you described it is spot on. Like, I've made recipes that actually call for like a couple of cups of it. And you're right, it kind of can have a little bit of a
Two
chalky
cups?
flavor to it.
I can't. That's
It
too
was a lot of
much.
Nooch. Yeah, it
That's
was
too
like a
much.
cup per can of beans. And it was like that's a lot. I mean, it tasted good, but there definitely was a little bit of chalky flavor there, if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
So I absolutely see what you're doing there. I got a couple of more for you about the recipes in there. We're talking about like if somebody wants to make a block of cheese that they could cut up, put on a charcuterie board or something like
Mhm.
that. You say there are recipes like that in the book that they can make
Definitely.
cheese like that?
Yes.
Ooh.
So I have a
How
recipe called
arduous of a process is that? Sorry to cut you
so
off.
oh, it's okay. It was insane. There was a few recipes that took us 30 to 40 tries to get right. And I was like
Awesome.
ready to throw in the towel, like our cheddar block. Oh my gosh, it was so hard to get right because here's the thing about cheese that melts and shreds and slices. You literally can't do it oil free, unfortunately, because it won't melt. Like it literally won't. We tried so many different ways. I really wanted cheese that was made out of vegetables. That was my goal. And so we were able to do it using like a tiny little bit of oil, and some recipes we were able to do without oil, but those cheeses actually don't melt, just so you know. But those cheeses actually do work really good if you like chop them up, or like the paneer, for instance, you can put it in a curry and it's not going to melt. And that's actually perfect. So yeah, it was so challenging to make the cheese chapter. It took so long. It took many ingredients, so many trips to the grocery store, and it was expensive because we were using expensive ingredients like nuts and seeds. And I buy everything organic, even when I'm recipe testing, because, I'm just that
Yeah.
girl. So,
Well, I don't want to scare the people off either. I think that the message here should be like, you did all this hard work and trial and error so that we, as the people who are getting the book, don't have to worry about any of that. You've
exactly.
laid out the steps. And
Yes.
in the end, for us who are buying the book, pretty easy to make, though.
Yes, absolutely. Like any person can make the cheeses, and the cheeses kind of go from, I think that none of them are advanced at all. Some of them just have a few extra steps, I would say. But for instance, there's like a farmer's cheese, the portable mozzarella, there's a cottage cheese, there's cream cheese that you can make multiple ways. So the cream cheese you can have plain, you can have a roasted garlic scallion cream cheese, or you can have a strawberry cheesecake cream cheese, which is so good. And there's also a spelt bagel recipe to kind of pair with the cream cheeses as
Ooh,
well, because you have to have a bagel with the cream cheese, of course. And I love spelt because spelt
oh
is
yeah, spelt is so good. Have you ever had like a spelt sourdough? Like
mhm,
I've seen this in some markets around here, and man, it is delicious. And I
so
bet you
good.
toasted that with some of that cream cheese that
Mhm.
the recipe that's in your book, man, that's living. That's
It
living.
really is. Like, it doesn't get
Yeah,
better
right.
than that. I know. We actually made like some cinnamon sugar bagels, but we used coconut sugar, and
Ooh.
we did the strawberry cheesecake cream cheese, and it was so good. So there's so many different ways that you can adjust the recipes to be flavored how you want them, and you can use the recipes kind of as a baseline, and then take it from there.
All right. Well, now you're talking coconut sugar. Let's wrap up by talking about some of your favorite desserts that are in the book.
Yes. I think the simple ones are also so great. So there's an oat chocolate put on everything sauce that's made from oats. And that's great because it's 100% allergy friendly, which I absolutely love. There's a churro corn cake, which is delicious. I work with an animal sanctuary here in San Diego, and we do pop-up dinners for them to raise money. And so last summer, we did this huge sheet pan churro corn cakes. I had this idea. I was thinking cornbread, but I wanted churros at the same time, but I also wanted it to be a cake. I don't know what I was thinking. So I made these huge churro corn cakes with macerated fruit and that oat chocolate sauce. And oh my goodness, it was amazing. So I decided to put them into little mini bump pans. And these little cakes are so good. So you definitely have to try them. We also have like an eggnog tres leches cake or a nutnog tres leches cake. And yeah, the dessert chapter goes off. There's a no churn raspberry matcha ice cream as well that I'm totally addicted to, that I love.
Ooh, oh my goodness, that all sounds so good. Like I just cannot wait. Book comes out February 17th.
February 11th.
11th. I'm sorry.
Yes.
February 11th, everybody. But pre-orders are available right now. We've got the link down below in the show notes for you, or you can just hop over to breakingupwithdairy.com. Links to virtually every store under the sun where you can get yourself a copy of it. So that's amazing.
We are also going on tour. Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're going on tour with Williams-Sonoma. Yes, which is a big deal because I don't think Williams-Sonoma has ever had a book like this that they have had in their stores. So we're very excited.
So are you going to be visiting a certain locations?
We're going to be New York City, Chicago, San Diego, San Francisco, Austin, and Nashville.
Washington, D.C.
I know.
D.C. Why don't you want to come here? Come on.
My East Coast stops are New York and Chicago, but honestly, it could extend depending on how the tour goes. So if anyone's listening, make sure to check out. We're posting the tour dates to our Substack first and then to our social media as well. So make sure you check it out to see if you can come.
We've got links to all of that stuff down below. The Substack, the tour dates, all of that good stuff is right there. Plus your opportunity to get your pre-order in for the book. And Chef Bae, now listen, I'm going to be on the West Coast later on in the year. I know that I'm going to be in the LA area in November. And you're in San Diego. Like maybe we should meet up halfway or something.
Yeah, let's do it for sure. It's only a couple hours difference, so we can definitely do that.
Giddy up. Let's go. I'm happy for you. Thank you so much, Chef Bae. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much.